Hello. Hopefully you can all hear me and see me, and this is actually working now. We're off to a fantastic start for I think it's the 95th Melbourne AWS user group here in lockdown in July. I think it's July. It could well be September by now. I don't really know anymore. And to compound it, just everything seems to be on fire with the broadcast today. So we're going to do as best as we can. If we do lose you, we'll jump back in and see what we can do. But for now, let's not tempt the gods. Let's just kick straight into it. So this is the introductions that I'm doing now. Following this, we'll have our usual news segment with Arjen and friends. This week, or this month, is Guy Morton is back again. And then we'll have our first presentation. Obviously, all of these times are now off by about 20 minutes. Sorry about that. Our first presentation is from Greg Cockburn. We're going to have a look at starting off with Amplify and all about, I think it's about Cognito and authentication, which is really good, something that I'm really interested in. And then we'll have our second presentation straight after that with Rian, an on-demand contact center in 10 minutes. This is an interactive presentation, so make sure you stick around and keep your phones nearby. Then we'll have some quick closing remarks, and then there'll be a post-stream Zoom catch-up, same as always. Please change, please change. Yay! This is an interactive live stream. You're probably about 15 seconds behind real time here at the moment. But we do bring your comments into the event where we can. If you see, you can leave comments on the Slack channel. Which way is it? That way. You can leave comments in the Slack channel and #Melbourne. You can leave comments on Twitter using the hashtag AWS Melbourne. Or you can leave it in the comments on the chat on YouTube, right where you're watching from. What have I done? There we go. A big thank you to Enabler, our gold sponsor for 2020. They've stuck through us through all of this, and they were here last year as well. Without them, we just couldn't put these events on. Maybe I'll go and ask them for a new MacBook. This one seems to be dying or something. Thanks as well to our silver sponsors, AC3, CMD, and Do It International. Again, big thank you to all of our sponsors. They help us out financially throughout the year. They also help contribute where they can. And really, these events can't exist without our sponsors. So big thank you to those guys. Who are we? I am Rob. I am at Bok on Slack. And my co-organizer is Arjen. You'll see him in the next segment in the news. Usually when we get asked, like when people come and are introduced to us, we're asked what we do at AWS. Neither Arjen nor I work for AWS. None of our volunteers work for AWS. We are completely independent from Amazon. We're just members of this community the same as you. That has its benefits in that we're at arm's length. We don't have to play nice with AWS all the time. We can call things as we see it, and we encourage our speakers and our community to call things as they see it as well. If you can come in and demonstrate that Azure is better at something than AWS, we're happy to hear it. A good place to get involved and to meet and talk to us is our Slack team. We have the largest Slack team, AWS-focused Slack team in Australia. Has its ups and downs in terms of activity, but generally is a good place to ask questions during the day, that sort of thing. We have a few channels listed on the slide there. Some of the best things we can do is when there are outages in AP Southeast 2, you'll find the outage channel gets quite busy with people confirming what's going on. The other people we can't do without for these events are you. We're always on the lookout for speakers. This is especially true at the moment. It is very hard to find speakers without a physical event for people to go to. So I would like to encourage anybody and everybody to put your hand up. We offer speaking mentoring as well if you've got something you'd like to talk about but don't really feel confident doing it. For these virtual events, if you want to pre-record and run your presentation that way, that's also fine. As long as you're happy to answer questions at the end of your presentation. But we're also in general looking for volunteers. There's a bunch of stuff that needs to be done with the websites and the other things like that as well. So a quick look at what else is on. Hopefully these other ones don't have as many technical issues as we're having tonight. But there is the Melbourne AWS Enterprise Meetup. I think this is one of those ones that used to be shared between the AWS offices on the East Coast. They're now hosting virtual meetups, and they're doing a one on the 6th of August, so next week. Cloud Operating Models with Simon Carter, who's a solutions architect from AWS, and the real-time governance and compliance with product owner at Transurban. So these meetups are obviously targeted at the enterprise. If you work for an enterprise and this is something you're interested in, jump on the link there and go register for that one. Coming up soon as well, towards the end of next month, there's a new conference called Data Engineering Bytes? I'm not sure. It's an online version of the data engineering conference that's usually on. And they've got their dates penciled in for the 20th and 21st of August. They don't have an agenda yet. I think they're still finalizing their speaker list. This is a paid event. So I've never been to one of these before, so I can't speak to how well it will be. But definitely worth having a look if there's something that might be interesting to you. And I think finally there is a multi-cloud engineering event on. This is the day before our August meetup. It's hosted by our silver sponsors, Do It International, and they are going to, looks like, push ECS to the limit and see how many containers they can get running on there and show you how you can do that as well. So I think that's all the slides I have. It is. I will throw it over to Arjen and Guy for a look at what's new in AWS this month.
Hey everyone, I was unmuted. I am not muted.
Yeah, it was me. Sorry.
Yeah, cool. Hey everyone, welcome to the What's New section. We'll go through this a bit quick as we had a late start. But there's plenty of things to get excited about this month. So let's start with our usual, finally in ANZ this time. Why ANZ instead of just Sydney? Because Outposts is now available in New Zealand, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, and pretty cool and very expensive. But look, if you've got a use case for it, I guess they'll probably sell some, or at least they'll rent some, I guess, because that's the model. But if you're wondering, about the smallest one you can have is about 8,000 USD a month, and that's just for a dev test outpost, and it goes up to 48K per month USD. So you've got to have pretty deep pockets, but I guess if you're a bank or some big enterprise that's got some need to have low latency, close by AWS resources, and you want your own AZ basically in your data center, then fill your boots.
Yep. And other things that we got last month, we mentioned the new snow cone. We didn't get that one yet, but we did finally get Snowball Edge compute optimized.
Yep.
This is the snowball that you can run your compute on and basically have it act like a mobile computer. Well, the computer with Lambda functions and Greengrass and all that stuff. So that's fun.
Yeah, that's pretty nice too. It's got lots of, 52 CPUs for those people who care about the numbers, 208 gigs of memory, 42 terabytes of HDD capacity, and the nicest thing about, which I did want to call out, so there's no Australia tax on this. You can actually get these in Australia for the same price that you'd pay in the US, which is kind of unusual. $300 USD gets you one of these babies for 10 days, and it's $30 USD a day after that, and you can get discounted 1 year and 3 year pricing. So if you've got a useful one, at least we're not getting penalised for being in Australia this time.
Another one that might be interested is IoT Analytics, which was announced at reInvent 2018. So it took a while. Oh, no, sorry, that is a later one. IoT Analytics is not that one. But
there's so many products in the IoT suite, and it gets confusing.
It does.
Yeah.
Cool. But let's move on to the server section.
Mm-hmm.
We've got RDS proxy, which it sounds maybe strange in the server section, but we've discussed this before when the preview became available last month in Australia. RDS proxy is very helpful for your connections to the database from Lambda functions.
Yeah, so it basically manages a connection pool. So if a database goes away and your application, rather than having to kind of have an outage while it kind of brings up a secondary endpoint, it manages all that rerouting of requests on the fly for you. So the idea is you're going to minimize the amount of likelihood that you'll have an outage due to a database failure, plus a bunch of other things. But yeah. Now, the only restriction on that is it's MySQL and Postgres only, so you can't, there's no SQL Server or anything like that. So it's just those engines, the main thing to be aware of.
The other thing here, interesting, is for those of you like me who've been using the serverless application model to deploy their stuff to production, apparently you can now actually use it for that.
Yeah. So if you were doing that before, well, shame on you. You didn't know, but you weren't supposed to be doing that. But yeah. So it's now version 1.0.0. Yeah.
Yep. Oh, that's a big step.
Yep. Absolutely. It's come of age. It's grown up. It's leaving home. Yeah.
Well, on the container side, ECS has a new version of the CLI, and instead of calling it CLI v2, they call it Copilot, probably because AWS knew that Rob, my great co-host here, was writing an app with that same name. Luckily, he has had a backup name for it, and it's renamed to Captain. So the app got an upgrade in. That's an
upgrade, isn't it? Yeah, it's going from Copilot to Captain. It's it's good.
So aside from that, an interesting one is in combination with Docker itself. AWS announced that you can now use Docker Compose or Docker Desktop to directly deploy to Fargate, which is interesting. As I've mentioned many times, Fargate is the best way to run containers. So,
yeah, I think that's really going to connect a bunch of developers who maybe have not been confident about how to make use of Fargate in the past. I was actually talking with a customer last week that I think this will be a really interesting announcement for them, because he understands Docker Compose but didn't know how to make it, connect it up with doing ECS Fargate. So I think this is going to sort of probably make that much more accessible for a whole bunch of developers.
Yeah. And speaking of developers, on the developer side, we've got CodeGuru now GA. CodeGuru, for those of you who don't remember, is basically, it allows you to scan your code either in the repo or running and suggest improvements or show you where things are not going as well. Limited to Java, which I know that Guy was going to mention anyway.
Yeah, no, it's great if you're a Java dev. It looks like a nice tool. Yeah, so what about CDK pipelines? I was just sharing before this that the idea gives me a headache because it feels like you're going to use CDK pipelines to develop a pipeline to deploy CDK project that could have pipelines in it, and hopefully by the time we talk about this on the podcast, I'll have managed to make the concept work in my brain.
Yeah. Well, I'll happily hear you talk about it then.
Yeah.
In the meantime, it is interesting. It's good to see them improving CDK. The other big announcement there was that you can now have CDK generate your Terraform templates.
Yeah.
So that's also interesting.
Let the holy wars begin. So it was bad enough Terraform versus CloudFormation versus every other tool there is, and I sort of was thinking CDK. This is going to be the argument stopper because it'll be a good way to avoid that argument. But now, of course, you can have that argument in CDK as well. CloudFormation versus Terraform.
Yep. On the security side, so one thing I want to call out here, which may have seen come up, it turns out that if you used the AWS AI services, you were automatically opted in to sharing the content with AWS to improve those services. After people complained about that on Twitter and other places, suddenly there is now a tool where you can turn that off instead of having to create a support ticket. So if you use the AI services and are wary about sharing that content, definitely have a look at that, because it's pretty important for you.
Yeah. What do you think that were they actually in breach of things like GDPR with that, or was it more just that they just made an assumption that everyone would love to help improve their AI by donating their data to it?
I don't know. I didn't look well enough into it.
Yeah. I guess the other one there is fraud detector. That's
Yep.
GA as well, I think, and available now in Sydney. So I think it wasn't available before. So that's a sort of machine learning based system for detecting fake accounts and online payment fraud, which I think may be of interest to some in Australia too now.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So some other cool stuff that came out. The things everybody's been waiting for, the Deep Razor Evo and Sensor Kit to upgrade your Deep Razors, is available, only shipping to the US.
Yeah.
So make sure you use a forwarder for that if you want to ship it.
While stocks last. So, yeah.
Yep.
And I think that they released it a little while ago. So, yeah, if you're interested in that stuff, probably get onto it quick, just in case. Yeah, I mean the add-ons there look pretty fun. So you've got an additional camera and a scanning LiDAR, and that's the thing that sits on the back of the camera and sort of allows you to do object detection from the back as well as the front. So the second camera at the front gives you parallax, so you can do depth detection, and the LiDAR at the back gives you detection of things behind you, basically, and I guess beside you. So it's almost like a Tesla.
Yep, almost.
Yep.
It's a little small.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go into the rest of these right now, but I know that contact lens for Connect will come up later when Rian is talking about that. So looking forward to hearing about that. And then, as always, Guy mentioned it earlier, but we also do a podcast about all of this every month. Next one will be recording early next week, and hopefully it will go up soon after. There's no time limit there, so
we carry on like pork chops, basically, don't we?
Yeah.
Yeah. All of our deepest fears and insecurities and deepest, darkest hates and wants will be fully explored.
Yep. Something like that. But with that, thank you for listening, and we'll move on to the main.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. I'm never in the middle of this frame. So first up is our first speaker, Greg. As before, Greg's starting off with Amplify. If you haven't met Greg before, he's a technology evangelist and a versatilist. Versatilist? I'll let Greg explain that. He spends a lot of his time on cloud thought leadership within AC3 with customers and the greater community. He's spoken at a number of events across topics like DevOps and Kubernetes and containers and that sort of thing. He works with a large range of companies and customers to help them define their technology roadmaps and strategy. There's a lot of buzzwords in this sentence that I'm reading here. Anyway, so this is a bit of a rehearsal for the AWS Virtual Amplify Days conference that's coming up. So you might see Greg drop a few hints to that during his presentation. And even though you're seeing the best presentation from that conference tonight, there is still a lot of other great content, so you definitely want to check that out. And with no further ado,
Now I'm live. All right, cool. Thanks, Rob. Thanks for that introduction. And as you mentioned, yes, this is going to be a video version of this one that I'll be recording at some point in time. Will be viewable on the 20th. I think there's going to be 2 days of talks, the 20th and 21st of August. I'm around about the 10 or 11 a.m. slot on the first day, and there's plenty of people after me. So I kind of start off with the easy one. So when I got asked to look into this, I kind of asked around and asked some people what kind of stumbling blocks they had when they were starting off with Amplify. And a couple that came up that was interesting to me was one of them was around authentication and federating with the socials. The other one was the new console that was released earlier this year and deploying with multiple teams. So I'm going to cover off both of those. How about now? I'm back again. All right, cool. So not sure what we lost there, but I think it was when I jumped slides because I had the wrong focus. Yep. So Greg Coburn, Principal Practice Lead at AC3. You can find me on Twitter at GergenZ, on GitHub, github.com, GergenZ, and LinkedIn/IN/GergenZ as well. I'm also the maintainer for CFN DSL, so you can find that on GitHub as well. All right, cool. So what are we going to cover tonight? We're going to jump into the authentication in Amplify and how you add it and what's in the back end. And we'll cover off a little bit about what Cognito is at a very high level, how Cognito and Amplify work together, so what options you have available, how does the authentication flow work, and then I'm going to jump into doing a pseudo demo where I've taken a whole bunch of screenshots of adding Google authentication. And then we'll talk about some of the things I found when doing that. Some of the little interesting bits and pieces that I ran into and found a few issues on GitHub that I had to follow through to get it all working when you're using the second part of my talk, which is the Amplify console. So the Amplify console, I believe the version that's up there today was released in about March this year. I've had a bit of a play with it and gone through the motions of environments and branches. You used to only be able to do environments. Now you can do branches and do different deployments. So I've got a couple of examples of that. And you could also actually deploy with a password protected site, which is something you often hear people wanting to do when they're in UAT. Alrighty. So what is Cognito? Cognito is a service all by itself, and it's what Amplify uses to provide you with the authentication backend to an Amplify-based app. So it's a separate piece of the Amplify backend service that you add to your Amplify app, and you can either use the internal user database, or you can integrate with the social identity providers such as Facebook, Google, and Amazon. And you can also hook into other SAML 2.0 providers. So in Amplify specifically, there's only 4 available at the moment. If you want to be able to use other authentication methods, you're going to have to either fiddle around with the CloudFormation and Amplify, or add it later on. It's not ideal, and there's a little bit of workarounds. We've got it working in the past because we've got an app that we've deployed in a couple of places that hooks into Azure AD, an Azure AD app that you create, and you can hook that into Cognito, but it's not perfect by any means. But the services that are available out of the box are Apple, Google Plus. So yes, they still refer to it as Google Plus, even though Google Plus is kind of dead. Amazon, of course, and Facebook. I don't have a Facebook account, so I wasn't going to spin up to do the testing. So I went with Google for this. So a little bit about how the authentication flow works. So there's a whole page in the Cognito user docs that goes on about all the authentication flows that are possible with SAML and OAuth and OpenID and all the tokens that are going in backwards and forwards and all the rest of it. And a little bit like what Guy said earlier, my mind explodes as to what's going on because there's so many movements of tokens and bits and pieces. But this one here kind of gives you the idea of what's going on between the login, the developer provided endpoint, Cognito, and how you get a token from S to S so that you can access the resources that you're permitted to get access to. All right, so we'll kick off by doing creating a simple application. I'm using Yarn, so we run the Yarn create React app auth test. Auth test is just a name, so you can call it whatever you want. CD into that, run all add the AWS Amplify libraries, Amplify in it, Yarn start, and you've got a environment up and running at localhost 3000. And that becomes important in a second for callback URLs, etc. And of course, we want to git commit that so we know where we've started. And hopefully you end up with something like this. Okay, now for the Google part of this, you need to have a Google account. I used my Gmail for this one. I didn't use one of my mini organizations that I have. So you should be able to get up and running pretty simply. If you're wanting to do this for real, you might run into some limitations, and you might need to get some more access. But the first thing you need to do, sign in and head towards console.developers.google.com. Once there, you need to create a new project. And in the bottom part of the screen, you can see I've created one called auth test. Once you go through the creation phase, the setup inside of Google wants you to set up the OAuth consent screen. Now, for the purposes of this demonstration, and if you're wanting to use this for kind of everybody in the world, you want to go with the externally visible version. Now, if you're doing this inside your organization and you only want to have like a single sign-on type experience for the application that you're building, you can change this to be internal. Now, on the OAuth consent screen, you also probably want to do things like put your privacy policy up there, a link to that, talk about what permissions you're going to gather and ask Google for. But for the purposes of this demo, I kind of left that all alone. Application name, I'm just calling that auth test as you saw on the previous scheme. So I did nothing else. External was default, and I just had to give it a name. Those are the only two things that I had to do. Once you've got the application set up, you need to start creating some credentials so that you can use. So with Google and the integration between Google and Cognito, it uses OAuth 2. So with your auth test, your new application selected, you want to create a new set of credentials using OAuth client ID. This walks you through a little wizard. Now, depending on what type of devices are going to be logging in, you can select the application type. For me, for this demo today, I selected web application, but there's Android, there's a Chrome app, there's iOS, not Cisco iOS, TVs, and other similar input devices. A desktop app, I assume they're referring to something like an Electron app or something like that, and a universal Windows platform. And if someone knows a little bit more about Windows, they might be able to tell me what that is. So once you want to create the new set of credentials, you give your client a name. So in this example, I've just left it as the default, so web client 1. And then you need to leave everything else empty. We will fill in the authorized JavaScript origins and the authorized redirect URIs in a later stage. So we'll come back to that in a second. So once you've got that done, hit create, and you should get some credentials. Now I'll note these have now been killed, so you can take all the screenshots you want. You won't be able to use my API keys to do any authentication. All right, now we want to add the authentication component into our Amplify application. So we had the very simple one that you saw earlier, just the default out of the box one, nothing particularly special. If you're further along your journey, you might have more, but it's a really simple process. You just simply type in Amplify add auth, and it goes through the wizard. I've just picked the default configuration with social provider for federation, username, don't want to change any other settings. Two things important here are the redirect sign-in URL and the redirect sign-out URI. For the purposes of this demo, I've just been using the local development ones, which is http://localhost 3000. But in your real-world example, you'll want to have those point to something that's going to go after the user signs in and what the user is taken to after they sign out, which might be the original sign-in page again, for example. Moving on from that, you'll see here in the last piece of the section, it's asked for in the last piece of the wizard, it's asked for the Google Web Client ID and the Google Web Client secret. So those were those two items that were given to us once we created those credentials, and I've copied and pasted them into here. Now from here, you do an Amplify push, and it creates the Cognito backend components. Now, when that completes, you end up with this hosted ID endpoint. Now remember back on the end of that screen, when we created the credentials back in the Google console, developer console. So the authorized JavaScript origins is this URI. One key thing to remember, no trailing slash. Google does warn you when you have this trailing slash, but for whatever reason, however the workflow works, you can't have that trailing slash. Now the authorized redirect URIs is this URI, but with OAuth2/IDP response concatenated to the end of that URI. So that's going to pass the token back after it's done the after Google has authenticated that user and passed the authorization back to Cognito and ultimately back into your app. So this URI is a Cognito component. So you can see that as part of the host name there, it's Amazon Cognito. It's not specifically part of your app. It's Cognito at the back end. Now, if you want to, you can set up a unique domain in Cognito, but for the purposes of this demo, I'm not going through that today. All right. Let's code up example little application. So the first part is we want to add in some boilerplate imports. So probably the defaults from memory import React, and it's pretty boring. Import Amplify, and not much else. We do the import AWS config for the AWS exports that Amplify is creating, and then we configure Amplify with that. So now we need to add in the auth and hub from Amplify, and the use state and use effect from React. So now we're going to create a function simply called app, and we're going to set a couple of constants, user and set user, from the use state method to whatever they're currently configured to when the app kicks off. Now we're going to handle the auth event and all of the flows that could possibly happen, and we've got a case statement here or a switch statement here with a number of cases that can be happening. Are we in sign-in? Have we got a Cognito hosted UI? Have we in the sign-in phase? Have we got a sign-in failure? And we're back into the Cognito hosted UI failure phase, and we're going to log something to the console. If we get the Cognito hosted UI, then we're going to get some user data and pass that back to the presentation, which I'll show you on the next screen. And there's another piece of this puzzle, which is get user, and I'll show you that function in a second on the second page. This data is available as part of the Cognito, as part of the Amplify samples. So you don't really need to go to GitHub or something into a repo that I've created. All of this data is actually just taken straight from the Amplify docs. Now the second part of the code here, here's the get user function. It's going to go and are we a current authenticated user from the auth object? And then we're going to get the user data and pass that back. And if there's nothing there, we're going to catch that exception and just log console.log not signed in. Now the presentation layer here, we've got a couple of options that if we're signed in, then we're going to print something. If not, we're going to show the federated sign-in button. And then, of course, we need to export our application called app, or our function called app. All right, so this is the application pretty straightforward, nothing really special. So on the top left-hand side, we've got the log user is shown as null, and the federated sign-in button. If we click the federated sign-in button on the right-hand side, you can see that we've got the OAuth consent screen, which has got nothing in it because, as I said earlier, I didn't populate it with anything. I choose one of the users, and then at the bottom of the screen, after our woohoo, it all works. You can see the information that Google is providing back as part of the authentication process. So we have authentication with Google up and running. From there, you can take that information, pull that JSON object apart, put it into DynamoDB, whatever you need to do, and use it with your application. Okay, so what's next? A couple of things that I picked up during this, because when I started to do this, I was deploying it, the second part of this talk, using the console, and I ran into a couple of errors. The one thing that I did pick up was that all of the authentication methods, so that's Google, Amazon, Facebook, etc., needs those secrets and client ID set as part of it. Now, how that's handled on the CLI is different to the console. So you need to export some variables in the Amplify console before you do that deploy, or it does the fail to build of the backend. Further reading can be found at the Amplify docs, long URL there, and then how to get started hooking that into something like the GraphQL API. But there's lots of example in the API in the Amplify docs on how to glue the authentication together. Okay, so on to the second part of the talk, and this is about the Amplify console. So the AWS console plus Amplify plus your favorite Git repo equals the Amplify console. Out of the box, there was GitHub, Bitbucket, GitLab, and of course our favorite Git repo storage, code commit. So those are the four that I think you could also use S3. Yeah, I think you could. Yep. To do pull-in code, and by default, you pretty much have to tie it into some sort of code source. Oh, there they are. Okay, so the kind of the three types of applications that you have that you can deploy from here is your full stack React Native type application, or if you're using other frameworks like Vue or something like that. You're a simple, pretty straightforward blog, for example, like a static website, or your full progressive web app can all be deployed and managed through the Amplify console. All right, so what are some of the kind of features? So the first time you set up your first run through, you get all of these things that you need to go and tick off. The last one isn't ticked off because I needed to have a private repo, and I thought it would be better not to, but it kind of enable pull requests, so we'll work from the bottom up. Enable pull requests previews gives you the option to build the application and actually take screenshots of it and have those as part of your pull request, which I think is pretty cool. Password protect your site. So that gives you the ability to put basic authentication in front of a branch or the master branch or whatever we call that branch today. Being able to set up a test version of your site by connecting to a feature branch. So I'll go into that and how that works. And also deploying to a custom domain with a free SSL cert, of course, managed by ACM and I was using Amazon Route 53, which made the integration really, really straightforward. And of course, nailed it. We did our first successful build of the app. Okay, so here's adding domains. Pretty straightforward. So I had created a new Amplify app. Went in, pushed that into GitHub, went into the Amplify console, added that repo to the Amplify console, and then I created a new domain. So I've used a subdomain as part of my domain, so performancemagic.com, and I've created it as console test. So console test is the equivalent of the production, which is currently hooked into the master branch. And then I created a new branch in my Amplify app, changed the source code, pushed that up, and went into the console and created a new feature branch called feature 01, and it automatically created that URL. You can also have Amplify create all of those all automatically for any new branch that you see, which is pretty cool. So here is managing those branches. So you can see the master at the top. I've done we've done a provision, we did the build, we did the deploy, and it's verified all good. And then the feature 01 branch here is currently in the build stage. All right, so password protection. So for the master branch, I want to have that publicly viewable, so we don't set up password protection on that one. On the feature branch, I've set up a restricted password required and just set a simple username and password so that the testers or the business or whoever it is who wants to see the new application, that's a new AT or the new feature, needs to put in the username and password so it doesn't get crawled, so it's not visible for people to go and play with. And that's pretty much it. Thank you, guys. Any questions?
Okay, Greg, that was fantastic. Thank you very much. We do have one question from the audience. Don't forget to, you can post your questions in Slack, on YouTube, or on Twitter. First question we had come through. Where is my question sheet? Here we go. It's from Matt Delves. Does the Cognito and Amplify stuff work with an auth provider that is still on OAuth 1.0a?
I honestly don't know. I don't remember anything in the documentation for Cognito talking about OAuth 1.0, so I'm suspecting not. I'll tell you what. I'll dig into that and we can have a response later on if that's all right, Rob.
Yeah, sounds good. He asked
Cool.
a question on Slack if you want to post an answer there. Just out of
all right, sure.
while we're waiting for other questions, how long did this take you to run through in general? Like how long did it take you to get to that where you got to?
So building all the bits and the pieces in the Amplify. So when I had it down pat, it was taking probably 30 minutes, and that's because I'm only on 100 megabits of NBN. I think the longest part of the puzzle, once I actually kind of understood it, was all of the JavaScript that downloads all of the various modules that Amplify wants to bring in when you do a yarn create, or probably actually React, right? That wants to bring that in. In the first time when I kind of wasn't 100% understanding exactly what I was doing, it probably took me about 2 hours, maybe.
Okay,
but
that's still pretty
once
quick.
once I understood what I'd done wrong, it was like straight away it just worked. So yeah, very, very straightforward. Yep.
Cool. That's all of the questions that we have here. Will you be around on Slack for a little while after this if anybody else has any more questions?
Sure. I'll jump in onto Slack now and happy to answer any more. Cool. Easy.
Great. Thanks very much.
No worries. Thanks, guys.
All right. So it looks like Rian has shared his presentation, so we're just about good to go there. Let me just bring up the info. Okay, so thank you very much to Rian for this one. He has agreed to run through some contact center stuff for us. I know we reached out to him at the last minute. Same with Greg, actually, so thank you very much to Greg as well. But Rian is a solutions architect for IDEA 11 in Brisbane and is also an APN ambassador. So we'll throw it over to Rian in a few moments.
G'day everybody, and thank you for sticking around. I know it's getting a little bit late, so I will try to get through this as quickly as possible. I am lying though, it won't take me 10 minutes, it's going to take me a little bit longer, but if you were to do this yourself and you didn't have to explain every single mouse click that you were doing, you could probably get it done in 10 minutes. There we go. How about now? The exact same thing that happened to Greg, so it's not my fault. So I'm going to embarrass Rob a little bit. It's actually pronounced Ryan, but it depends which country you're in. So I'll give you that. Ryan will be somewhere else. But to keep everything simple, everyone sort of calls me RBK because that's my email address. So I am up in Brisbane, so thank you for obviously the invite to come present virtually down in Melbourne. I've been at IDEA 11 for 9 years now. So started when the company was 3, and now we're around 60 now, so that's been a long time. As I said, solutions architect. My main focus is around infrastructure, so I leave the dev part to the devs. Been using AWS for quite a while now, and was recently lucky to join the ambassador team. All my details are there. Feel free to hit me up if you like. And let's see if we can get this without its muting. Yep, perfect. So I promise my slides will be super quick. I only have 6. And then we are going to go into a live demo. So I saw someone pray to the demo gods before. So let's hope that works out for me. So Amazon Connect is a omni-channel cloud contact center. So what that really means is voice and chat. So we can get calls coming in, like everyone knows when they need to ring up IT for support, but also being able to power chat as well. So having those chat bots and everything on the front of your website. Super simple to set up and get going. It has a real nice sort of graphical contact flow builder built in, which we'll go and have a play with shortly. Certainly really flexible and easy to integrate. So if you've got stuff like workforce management for performance tracking or staff forecasting, that's really easy to get going with the APIs, and there's even some built-in ones already for some of the places out there. But also, everything sort of dumps out to S3 and Kinesis, and you can bring it in with Lambda. So sort of your heart's content as such in terms of what you want to do with it. You can do inbound and outbound calling. That can be important to somebody because sometimes you only get one way. Cool thing is we got some pretty tight integration with Lex, which means we can do chatbots. Cool thing about those chatbots is you can use them not just for the online chat as such, but you can also use the exact same chatbot to power the voice part as well. So you can call up and chat to a robot. It's super fun. We're going to go in a little bit more down the AI and ML powered speech analytics towards the end, but basically we can start to do some really cool things there, but also using stuff like Poly and all of that to do the classic talking back in IVRs and that sort of thing instead of using recordings. Cool thing is it is pay as you go, which means this can be a pretty quick and simple solution. Pricing I've sort of got there on the right, but if you want to do some quick math, basically you pay a little bit for the voice usage going through the system, pay some money for the phone numbers that you can get, and then you have your inbound and outbound usage from there. Look at that, straight into the demo. All right, so what we are going to do, and let me bring up a couple of windows that I need to do this. Now, this is my backup one, so if the demo guides aren't really nice to me, well, we're going to go to that one. But I'm going to do this live as we go. So what we're going to do, we are going to create our a tenant as such. So from this tenant, this is where we're going to have our system. So from here, we're going to use the built-in database in Connect, but you can hook this in with things like Active Directory or SAML as well. So easily to tie in to any of the systems that you have. We can create an administrator user. So this is a user in that database. Type a good password, and now I got to type it again. Does it match? Woo! And basically, this just gives admin inside that system. You don't need it if you want to get into Connect, but a good way to be managing it. Next, we get telephony options. So you don't have to handle inbound or outbound calls. You can choose which way you want to go, but we're going to do that for both. And now we get to talk about the data storage. So I'm going to hit this customize button because it gives us a couple more options. So in Connect, we can do things like call recording, have the chat transcripts, scripts from the chatbots, as well as any reporting and that sort of thing. You also get contact flows. So contact flows, kind of a record of a transaction that goes through the system end to end. We're going to keep this all the same, but out of the box, everything into S3, everything encrypted. We like all of our settings. I'm going to hit create. Now that's going to take a minute, so I'm going to sort of talk about sort of some of the things my customers are using for this. Just some quick examples. I got to make up 45 seconds worth of content. So basically, some examples that we have: logistics companies that handle lots of drivers. And from those drivers, they don't turn up to work every day because they're sick or need to call in. So what they do is they call in to Connect. They then get a bot, and that bot goes, "Hey, how's it going? Who are you?" They answer, "Why can't you make it into work today?" They give a reason. And the bot goes, "What's your driver number?" Let them know. And then from there, we validate their details, take the information, and then pass that back to system, where then we put that into workflow management, rostering systems, and off from there, we can sort of do whatever we want. Look at that, that was quick. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open this in a window for later, and we're going to go straight into the system. So first thing we're going to do, we're going to ignore the wizard because we know what we're doing. And what we are going to do is we are going to grab a phone number, because if we don't have a phone number, no one's going to be able to call us. And as you can see, we can sort of grab phone numbers from around the world. We can even get more over here. So the difference between toll-free and DID. DID is sort of good used for internal numbers that you can point and probably don't publicize. Toll-free numbers mean obviously you accept the charges on the way in on behalf of the user. A little birdie at Amazon told me that toll-free can be better for their routing and capacity management because these numbers sort of float where these things are tied to real connections. So give it a go and see which way you want to. So I'm going to grab an Australian number and this number here. What I'm going to do, I'm going to take this phone number, I'm going to paste it in the chat so Rob can take a reference of that. So that phone number, I am going to need people to call later. Not yet, I'll tell you when, but that is our phone number. Even get an interactive demo. Here we go. Let's make sure it all works. So we've got our phone number. Perfect. So now we're going to move on to we need to tell the system when are we going? When have we got this going on? So we can come in here, have a look at our hours of operation. So what I'm going to do is we're going to set up a service desk. So we're going to basically build a help desk system because we're unlucky and we're the poor guys that kind of do the midnight shift. And also, if I don't do this, the talk won't work because we'll be out of hours. We're going to set this for 11 p.m. As our closing. We're going to make sure we set a time zone. So you can obviously have a system handling multiple time zones, which is great. And we are going to save our hours of operation. So we'll use that a little bit later. Next, what we need to do is we need a queue. So queue is obviously where people come in, wait on hold, and our agents will take people out of the queue so they can action what they need to action. So we're going to add a new queue. We're going to call this the service desk queue. I'm not going to give it a description. We're going to set our hours of operation to service desk. Going to give a callback ID. In Australia, this doesn't really work, but we're going to call it service desk. We're going to set our outbound caller ID. And what we're going to do from there, we're not going to play over Whisper Flow. I'll explain what those are later. We're going to set a limit. So out of the box, the thing to remember is Connect has a sort of a limit of 10 concurrent calls. That is a soft limit. Just need to put in your ticket and get that expanded. It can take sort of 48 hours just due to the way capacity sort of works for this service. So just make sure you get that in before you have to go. Your team will kind of help you get that through quicker if you need to. We were spinning up these obviously during I guess peak COVID, but I guess that's not really true anymore considering the situation you guys are having down south. So I'm hoping that doesn't become Queensland COVID again. But basically setting these limits, if you go over them, that will cause the system to register, nope, I'm full, error out, and then you can process that limit from there. So going to hit this queue and we're going to have it all there sitting for us. So the next thing we're going to do is set up a flow. And I'm going to do that by finding it. So flows are the meat and potatoes of Amazon Connect. This is how things get to where you want it to and how things get handled how you want it to. So there's quite a few different flow types, and we can see sort of all of these flow types here. In a nutshell, if I go quickly through them, contact flow, which is the main default one, that's sort of how inbound calls are handled and work like that. queue flows define sort of what happens to the customer when a customer is in the queue waiting to be picked up by an agent. Hold flows are if the customer, what the customer happens when they're sort of dumped onto hold, which isn't necessarily dumped into a queue. Whisper flows. So whisper flows are basically sort of you can do, for example, you dump someone in as a transfer to somewhere else, and it will say to that customer, your call is now being recorded, or something like that. So it's something that happens before the call sort of completely connects. You can have also outbound whisper flows. So what that can be done is sort of what the customer experiences when on an outbound connection to an agent. Hold flows, what the agent hears when you put on hold. Agent whisper flows, what happens when an agent is connected to a customer. So what that can mean is, let's say you have a call, you're working in multiple queues as such, so the service desk or the complaints department or that sort of thing. When they get the call coming through, it'll chirp in their ear, you're now having a call from the service desk, and then the customer will connect. So it can just be handy to pass information to the agent before they accept it. And then transfers, same sort of thing. What happens when things get transferred in and out? So what we're going to do is we are going to create a service desk contact flow. And this is the cool bit. So this is where you get to have all the fun. We get a nice graphical interface for people like me who don't want to code. We can draw the squiggly lines, and boom, we've got some smarts. So makes it really easy to visualize, makes it really easy for then your team or if you're a consultant, your customers and that sort of thing to also self-manage and do what they need to do. So everything sort of starts out with an entry point, and then we end up with some exits. So what we are going to do first is we've got our different types of blocks that we can draw on here. We're going to do some sets. So sets allow us to specify what happens to the call. So what we got to think is this is someone calls, we come in and hit our entry point, which we'll set up later. So the first thing we need to do is we need to set our working queue. So we need to tell this, hey, you're going to go to this queue. So boom, we just draw the little line and off we go. Now we can do some settings for this. So on our working queue, over here, we're going to come and find our service desk queue. So we're telling this that, hey, you're going to be the service desk queue. You can also use attributes and that sort of thing to steer how these things work and make it a little bit more dynamic. So you can get attributes or set attributes from the caller or their details and that, and then sort of do some fancier stuff from there. So we're going to set our queue. Now, all of these boxes I'm going to sort of drag on. I'm going to sort of do kind of the maximum amount that you're going to do to achieve just a simple queue, but you certainly don't need all of them. It's just to sort of demonstrate some of the activity and behavior that you control. So we've set our queue. What we are now going to do is set our logging behavior, because we all like logs and just storing them everywhere. So from success, we're going to go and set the logging behavior. So this is basically what we're doing is we're taking those contact traces and they are getting flowed out to CloudWatch logs. So that means we can then even do stuff with that as sort of calls go through, or visualize or put into a data lake, or do whatever you want to do. What all those people do with data. So next, so we've got our logging. That's great. Now we need some recording, because we all know that we need to record everything for quality and training purposes. So what we're going to do is set our recording and analytics. Now, this thing's really cool. I'm going to come back to it at the end, but we're going to turn it on. So what we're doing call recording, because we want to record the agent and the customer. You can obviously set a couple of different things. If you're kind of thinking about this in your head as I'm going, it means we can do dynamic switching and turn recording off, turn recording back on, or do what we need to do based on what the flow we dictate. and I'm going to turn this on as well. So this is the new machine learning sort of analytics that we can now do on calls. I'll go into it a little bit later, but this came out on Friday. So that's pretty awesome and well timed for this presentation. Thank you, AWS. So now that we have our recording set up, what we need to do is we're going to set what are we going to do? We're going to set the hold flow. Cool. Next block. So, yep, we successfully set a setting. That can't fail, so that's awesome. Now our hold flow. So what we're going to do is we're just going to do the default agent hold and put that in there. Now I'll explain what that means. If we come back out to contact flows, now we all talked about, you listened, all the different hold flows that we had. So basically this default agent hold, now if we go into this guy, it's just another flow. So when the agent comes in on hold, they will hear this, you are on hold. Now the agent hears that, repeats every 10 seconds, and that's Polly yelling at us in some language. So that's what we have. So here's how you can kind of see how flows work together, and you can use them in that way. Apologies if you can hear my dogs shaking on the floor. So now we've set our agent hold and we know kind of how that works. What we're going to do is set the customer queue. I'll put that up here. So we're going to go success up to our customer queue. So now what we're doing is we're putting it in here. So this is the flow that gets run when the customer is transferred to the queue. So you could do things there like grab some data or play them some messages and some songs because everyone loves being on hold. And we'll set that. Now the thing is, as I said, putting all the blocks that we can. Any of these default ones. So if you don't actually set these default ones are what actually get enabled. But if I set up every single one of them, we certainly wouldn't be here for 10 minutes that I promised you all. So what we're going to do now is set a whisper flow. So whisper flow, once again, is basically what gets played to a customer or agent before the call connects. And we're going to do our agent one. Then from there, the all-important thing, set the voice. Now, I don't know how many of you have sat there with Polly and just typed things into it all day and put it into different languages and laugh at it. But basically, we're going to set this to Australian. I don't like Russell that much, so I'm going to use Nicole. And we're going to set the voice that any of our text to speech that happens in this flow happens. So we're going to say, thank you, Nicole. Now we sort of get to do, we've sort of set all of our base settings. So now I'm going to find the right button, which is one of these, and make sure that we start making some decisions. So the first decision we sort of want to make is we want to check, hey, is the queue actually open? Now, it's using the current queue, so it'll come back here and look that we have, this is our working queue established during the flow. So kind of think of these set things as variables. So we're setting all of the variables and we're just happening to go down the chain as we go. So we're going to check that here is the current queue, and if it's in hours, out of hours, and we can basically drag off what we're going to do based on those. You can come into here and override the operating hours and that, but we're going to use the hours that we set against the queue. Now we have our queue. What we also need to do is check staff. Now this one's hilarious if you don't set it, because if you don't set, hey, let's actually check the staffing, you can just have all your customers sit in the queue with no agents logged in and they'll just sit on hold forever. So it depends, I guess, what type of customer service you're trying to propose. I think most companies probably actually leave this part out by judging how long we all spend on hold. But this will allow us to check our staffing, and we're going to check that our help desk is actually staffed. People are logged in and available and ready to take the call. So once we've done that, that's in our queue. In our whole flow here, that's actually kind of the end for what we're going to do. So we're then going to dump that call out to the queue, and boom, hopefully an agent is paying attention and they will get the call. Now we kind of need to handle some of our other decisions. So what we are going to do is we're going to start doing some interactions. So firstly, what we need to do is, okay, well, what happens when we're not in hours? So we can either select an audio prompt, and there's a whole bunch here, so you can upload your thing, or what we can do is we can do dynamic text to speech. So what we can do is something like, the support center is currently closed. And because of the time, I'm not going to read the write the rest of that sentence. So we're saying, hey, sorry, we're closed. Call back later. And what we're going to do is we're going to go from our out of hours to say, sorry, it's closed. And then this is kind of the fun button. We're just going to hang up, because we've all been on a call center that's just hung up on us all the time. Next, we're going to do is we have a whole bunch of these error states, and basically those error states are, hey, it tried to set the queue. No, there was something wrong with that, or you tried to set something and it didn't work. So what we're going to do is get another prompt. We are going to do some text to speech and go, sorry, we are currently experiencing high demand. So this is how all contact centers sort of lie to you when their system bugs and goes out. They just go, no, high demand, and they disconnect you. So we're going to have that. And what we're going to do, we're going to play pin the tail on donkey. So we're going to go this error. We're going to go this error. We're going to go this error. I always hate when I do this demo and I miss one and then it yells at me. We're going to go this error. We're going to go this error. And then we're going to hang up. Now, obviously, that's probably not the way to handle your call flow, but I'm not taking a survey at the end, so we're all good. So what I'm going to do is we're going to give this flow a name. We're going to hit save. Now you can just hit publish, but I guess what I wanted to call out here, Socket devs, we get version control too. So we can have all of our different saved versions of this flow, and it doesn't go live until I publish it. Obviously, it makes it active, can impact live traffic, so I get a deploy button as well. Oh, no, we missed one. We missed one. So what we have to do, we just hang up. Save it again. Publish. Cross your fingers. Live demo. And then, okay, cool. So now we have our flow. So this is how our call, yep, if you can follow these, this is how our call is going to work. And we have that published. So what I'm going to do is we're going to go back to our phone number. I'm going to grab this phone number and we're going to send it to our service desk flow. Cool, we've hooked up the phone number. That's great. So now what we need to do is what's called a routing profile. So a routing profile basically is how we steer queues to agents. So we're going to take a service desk, and because we don't care about naming, we're just going to do voice for this, but you can also have chat and that sort of thing as well. We are going to send it to our service desk queue. We're going to give also an outbound queue. Now, agents, if required, can also do outbound dialing as such. And what it does is it'll basically create a call in the queue, just so you have stats and everything for your outbound dialing as well. So we're going to add that profile. And we're getting real close to the fun part. So now that we have our profile, we are going to create our agent. You can see here, here's my admin account, but I'm too important and don't take calls. So we're going to set up our user, and we're going to have my friend Steve Rogers take the call. But he's a freeloader, so he uses my email address. We're going to type in a password and hope I remember it. So what we're doing, we then put that into our routing profile. So once again, the agent is a part of the routing profile, and that's how we tell the system, hey, these are the queues that guy uses. We're going to give him a security profile. So we have a couple of different things here. Admins are what kind of I'm logged in as an admin. Agents are your call center main users, so they really only kind of get access to their calling interface. Call center managers sort of get to see some stats and reporting, and quality analysts are kind of similar. So you can add multiple, but Steve is our agent. We're going to, I'll leave this for now, but we'll see it later. You can be a real jerk to your call center agents if you just want to make sure that as soon as the call rings on their phone, it picks up and they have to start working. And we're going to give them some after call work time. So after call work, basically what that means is I've finished my call. Now I get 120 seconds to write any notes that I need to do for that call until I'm dumped back in the queue and I can accept another call. I don't know how many people have worked in call centers, but that's usually a lot longer than what you get. And we're going to save Steve. We're going to create him. And boom, we've got a new user. So now what we're going to do is we have that user. So now if I can find my browser that we had before, we're going, actually what I'm going to do, because we like stats, everyone likes stats and everyone likes dashboards. So we're going to get in some live dashboards while I have this open. So we're going to log in as my mate Steve. I'm not going to let it talk to my microphone because what I'm going to do, so the cool thing is you don't have to use the soft phone built into it, so it'll just use your browser and all there. I'm going to forward it out to my desk phone. This is my mode, and I am going to set myself to available. Now, that's going to my phone. Here's my phone. We can all see we're ready here. So if anyone wants to make my live demo a success and wrote down that phone number, you can call now. Dun, 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 dun. And what we'll do, oh, look at this. Now we're broadcasting their mobile number to the internet, so that's probably fun. I can now see my call on the phone. I'm going to pick that up. There's our whisper. Okay, hi, this is Ryan. Thank you for calling and proving that my live demo actually works.
Don't worry.
Perfect. So we're going to end that. I didn't say bye. That's not very nice of me. And then I get shoved into my after call work. Now I can go type my ticket notes and do all of that. And we're kind of good to go from there. So what I just wanted to show, obviously we came in, I'm now in after call work. We had some calls here. When I demoed this at work, I had like 50 people sitting in the queue because they all thought it would be really funny. So that was good. So I'm going to leave that in after call work. Actually, I'm going to set myself to offline so no one else can call me. And it goes to my voicemail while I'm trying to talk to all of you. And now I just wanted to go through one sort of extra feature that that Connect has graced us with recently. So that is the contact lens for Amazon Connect. So this came out in Sydney very early on Friday. And basically what we have here is machine learning based analytics. So it's really kind of important to extract information from our customer conversations. There's a lot of data there that we can use. And the way it works is we take an automatic call transcription. So we record the call, gets sent and run through transcribe. And wow. I got a call coming through us from Saudi Arabia, so I hope someone else is having fun with that. So we take that transcription, and what we do is it can sort of redact sensitive personal information as well. So if it thinks it's about you're about to say your name or your birthday or something like that, it'll try and get rid of that PII information as it goes. It's not 100%, as you can imagine. For example, you can see here, I said on the call, hello, this is Ryan, and it said, hello, this is right. So I like to think I'm right all the time, but that's a little excessive. And so from here, it extracts sentiment. So sentiment here, that was positive because it thought I was right. But then it went, oh, we need some support. That's kind of neutral. I'll show a bit more of a demo after that. It can detect issues and categorize calls based on your rules. So you can set words and phrases and get that to tag against the call. And you also get this sort of thing. It's for one call, it's the biggest JSON file you've probably ever seen. And you can take that information, put that into a data lake, because I know what that means. And take that information, and I'm sure QuickSight or Athena can do something with it. No, you can take that information, process it, and obviously go through and do what you want. Guy sort of asked me before, hey, can we do a word cloud? I'm sure someone smart with Python could do us a word cloud. Super simple to set up. You actually watched me do it. It's just tick that box and tell it what language you're doing it in. And it's costed at that 1.5 cents a minute that it analyzes. That may sound expensive, kind of just really is going to vary on how you're using it. But also you can have this dynamically on and off depending on maybe you only want to do it on some calls or not, that sort of thing. So quickly, I promise, a demo. And this is where I am going to go back to the one I prepared earlier. So what you can do is, that's a lie. What you can do is you can come in here and do searches against all of the calls and flows that came into your system. And I'm just pulling up a historic report because it makes it a bit easier. Oh, ignore me. We're going to here. You can see how they came in, what phone numbers, that sort of thing, but you can also start to do stuff with transcriptions. So we can go, show me any call that had the word Seattle in it. Was it used by the agent? Was it used by the customer? Show me all the calls with sentiment scores that were good or bad or went up or down or non-talk time. So I don't know how many people have had those awkward call center calls where there's just silence between you for like a minute. That's kind of what you're looking for. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to pull up a call. This is a call I recorded with myself. So if you can imagine a person having mute on 2 phones and doing this, that's what I did for this phone call. So for 2 minutes. So we have a look at our call. We saw it was an inbound call. This was the customer's number. Went to our mate Steve, and over the course of the call, we started off a little bit negative, and then we got towards our positive at the end. From our customer sentiment, we can have a look at our total talk time, how much of that was the customer, how much of that was the agent, and the non-talk time. We can then, these are those categories. So I don't have any set up for that, but if we come in here to rules, this is where we can define those categories. So any of the words mentioned, were not mentioned during whenever in the call, and the speaker was blah. So you could do things like this, like put in all of your competitor names. So show me all the calls where our competitors were mentioned. So you can, or show me all the calls where some not nice words were used. So that's what you can kind of use these for, and that will come up here in the categories of what it tags against the call. And then here we can see the transcript. So you can actually play back this audio as you go, and it will walk you through the transcript and then also the sentiment that we had. So, hey, need some support. How can I help you? Oh, I can't log in. Well, that's obviously not a happy thing. Let's see how we can go. Okay, that's awesome. And you can sort of walk your way through the call. And this is kind of a common trend. If you look at things from a service desk perspective, the call usually start off not great because nobody calls a service desk going, my computer works really great, thanks, and hangs up. They usually start out with something's not working, but your goal would be then to sort of make sure that those calls end in a positive note, not someone going, well, you didn't fix my thing, thanks, and hang up. So this is Connect Lens. All of this information is obviously stored in an S3 bucket, just like anything else fun in AWS. You can take that information and do with it as you will. I got time for some questions. If you know how to use a QR code, this is a blog post that I wrote a little while ago, so it doesn't have the contact lens stuff in it, but you can see how easy it is to turn on. Sort of to do exactly what I've done in this talk, step by step. And yeah, it should take you 10 minutes instead of the however long I've been talking for now, because you don't have to explain it to anybody or talk as lot as I do. So yeah, Rob, if we got any questions, happy to answer them, or maybe I was just so good there are none. Oh.
Thanks, Ryan. That was awesome. I think everybody enjoyed it. So we did get a couple of questions from Peter Binstead. I saw that in the chat there were some helpful people answering there as well, but I'm still going to ask you because you're my expert today. So,
like a pretender.
Yeah. First question is, can you port existing phone numbers across to AWS Connect?
Yeah, there is methods to bringing your phone numbers across. You just need to work with support to do that, I believe, is the process. There also is sort of nothing stopping you. Just like if you got 1-300 numbers in that are sort of more virtual numbers, you can just forward that into the system as well. It's also a good way to sort of A/B test your systems and that sort of stuff as well. What you can do is if you want to try it out, you can sort of go with your call sort of routing. You can say, well, these support calls today are going to go to Connect, so you can try it out and handle it with the numbers like that. But yeah, there are ways to bring in your own numbers.
Cool. And Peter's second question was, what approaches have you used for testing the changes in a flow before implementing them in production?
Yeah, great question. So in there, and what I'll do is I'll bring back up the screen. So if we have a look at, I'll go back to the one that we set up. So the way that you can kind of handle this, if we come into a flow, it's not elegant, but you can export the flows as well. So what I would suggest is sort of having like another copy of it as such. Having all of this stuff is kind of free. You can have as much configuration in there as you want. So you can just create another flow and then switch over to it. Sort of a bit like if you were doing like a DNS cutover for something. Or what you can do is design in sort of the B flow and change the way it routes. But this is a sort of easy way. Save a copy with like give it a version it in the name as such, and then just update what points to it.
Cool. Thank you. I can't see any more questions. No.
Awesome.
So it sounds you were as awesome as you thought you were. So thank you again. Good presentation.
Thanks, everyone.
I'll hand it over to Rob.
Awesome. Thanks very much, Ryan. And I'm sorry I got your name wrong. I should have asked that at the start. That's definitely something that's part of my process. But yeah, I blame the crashing technology, to be fair. Cool. So that brings us to the end of another meetup. I've got my slides here to finish off. So our next meetup will be in August. All signs point to it being another virtual one. I think even if we do come back out of stage 3, we probably won't have it in person anyway. Like, to be honest, even the rest of this year is looking doubtful at this point in time, but we'll play it by ear. You can always find out information on our Twitter account or on Slack. Keep up to date with those things. And we'll obviously email the group as well on Meetup. But yes, 26th of August is our next Meetup, and looks like we already have 2 presenters locked in for that, so it's looking really good. Big thank you again to our sponsors, Enabler, AC3, CMD, and Do It International. Obviously, we can't do these events again without them, so big thanks to them again. And to the virtual pub. And I did the same thing that I did last month, and I forgot to post the Zoom link in the Slack. So let me post that right now. It's done. Come and join us on Zoom. We'll wrap up what's just happened, and maybe I can pick up the smoldering mess of my laptop while we're doing it. Thanks everybody for joining us. See you next month.